I'm going to start by telling you a story about baseball. Don't worry, it's going to be fine. All right, so Nolan Ryan is a Hall of Fame pitcher, right? He holds a record for the number of no-hitters. He has 7, okay? 7. In the history of Major League Baseball, there are 5 pitchers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, who have more than 2. And the next closest to Nolan Ryan is Sandy Koufax with 4. So Nolan Ryan was the real deal, right? His second no-hitter was against the Detroit Tigers. And he strikes out the first baseman, Norm Cash. Norm Cash turns around, walks back to the dugout, sits on the bench. And the guy next to him said, hey, Norm, what's he got? What's he throwing? And Norm Cash turns and looks at him and says, don't go up there. So I think a lot of young people have a very similar attitude about politics right now. Whether they're intimidated or not, I think a lot of people look at politics and they see it as crazy and mean and unproductive, and they just don't want to go up there. And as a matter of fact, this attitude is reflected among young people all over the world. So this is a graph by Yasha Monk. He's a lecturer at Harvard. And this graph is the people who said yes to the question, it's essential to me to live in a democracy. And that x-axis is the age of the people being asked. So 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30. And the red one is the United States of America. Now, in political science, it is, to say the least, unusual to see a decline that steep. And some people are a little freaked out about this. But it's clear what's being communicated, right? Young people are saying, if this is what you got, if this is what democracy means, then what else you got? Okay. This graph, on the other hand, shows the turnout for young people in the last midterm election in 2018. It was a 50% increase over the last midterm, 2014. And again, 50% is a dramatic increase, unusual. And so a lot of people see this and they think, well, okay, it's not all bad. And that could be true. But keep in mind, in 2014, it was 20%. That's 1 in 5. That's really, really low. And even with a 50% increase, it's still less than 1 in 3, right? So the jury is still out with respect to what young people think about democracy. And that means the jury is still out with respect to democracy. Because if you looked at that graph, that x-axis, those older folks on the left end of the axis are going to exit the voting rolls, aka expire, a lot sooner than the ones on the right-hand side, right? But the last election is over, and the next one won't be here for a while. And more to the point, there's more to being in a democracy than just voting. Democracy is a distinctive, unusual, even unnatural way of organizing society. It requires skills and dispositions that have to be taught and learned and practiced. It takes a certain amount of work. So, quick review. In your lifetimes, democracy has been distinctly unpleasant and unproductive, and even in the best of circumstances, it's unnatural and takes a certain amount of work. How am I doing so far? The fact is that that's about the best that I or anybody else can do. Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. Now, that's not high praise, I know, but I think that gets it exactly right. The things that are unpleasant about democracy are not there because it's democracy. They're there because we are human beings. We are all power hungry. We are all tribal, and we are all self-righteous. And democracy is best, or okay, it's the least worst, because it deals better with our humanity than any other form of government. So I want to tell you, you're right if you're unhappy with democracy right now, and you're justified to be looking for alternatives. But you're wrong if you think those alternatives are out there. There is no philosopher king. There is no wise assembly. There is no perfect algorithm. There's just us, and we have to live together, and democracy is the least worst way to do that. So if all that is true, then we should think about what we can do to make our democracy better. Now, there may be lots of ways to do that, but one way is to make ourselves better Democrats. Now, I know you can't hear that without hearing the political party, so I'm just going to say free citizens. So that's what I want to do today. I want to talk about how you can make yourself a better free citizen. I'm going to give you 3 little things, but you should think about them as fundamentally political acts. They're things that you can do to build and sustain and improve our democracy. Number 1, tell the truth. Democracy is premised, it assumes the idea that we are going to disagree. And if a society is free, disagreement is inevitable and inescapable. And democracy sets up dialogue, debate, argument as a way for us to work through those disagreements. But that process only works if we reflect our positions honestly. If we lie, if we misrepresent what we think, then our dialogue isn't real. And when dialogue isn't real, argument becomes a waste of time. And when argument is a waste of time, then all we have left is raw power. In short, lies kill democracy. Now, I know what you're thinking, and you're right. Politicians spin. They talk around the truth. And all of us, if we have a partisan point of view, we are often, if not always, more concerned with our side winning than we are with the truth. But if we are going to be free citizens, we have to hold both of these commitments simultaneously. We have to be committed to our side and to the truth. Now, I don't want to mislead you. There is nothing easy about this. It's part of the hard work of being a free citizen. It requires a certain amount of bravery. But every time you do it, you should feel like you're doing your own little part for democracy. One more thing. If someone is brave enough to tell you the truth, your first response should not be to call them out, to condemn them, to talk about, to dismiss what they're saying. You can disagree. You will disagree. But your first response to the bravery of someone telling the truth should be some bravery of your own. You should be brave enough to listen. Number 2, practice democratic humility. This one's mine. Why is it so hard for us to be committed to the truth and to our side at the same time? Because we're wired that way. Scientific evidence is overwhelming that we are all inescapably biased. When we hear anything that runs counter to our beliefs and values, our brain automatically starts coming up with reasons for us to disparage, dismiss, or ignore what we're hearing. And this part of our brain starts to work before we're even consciously aware of what we're hearing. And that process within our brain is not accessible to our conscious selves. So that means that while with effort we can mitigate the effects, we can't overcome this, let alone turn it off. We are all inescapably biased. So what does this mean in terms of people with a partisan identity? Jeffrey Cohen is a psychologist at Stanford, and he did this experiment with his students. He gave them all 2 proposals for welfare reform. One proposal was harsher and more severe than anything any Republican was talking about, and the other was more lax and more generous than anything any Democrat had proposed. And when the partisan identities lined up with the proposals, everything was fine. But then for some students, he switched the partisan identities. So the Democratic proposal was the harsh one, and the Republican proposal was the generous one. And when he did that, the objective content of the proposal, the relevance, the import of the proposals themselves was rendered irrelevant. Cohen said it was reduced to nil. The students followed their partisan identity, even to the point where they were willing to ignore or dismiss the very beliefs and values that caused them to form that partisan identity in the first place. And this was true of Republicans and Democrats. All those students who had human brains, that's how they behaved. So if we know this to be true, what does this mean for us in terms of being a free citizen? It means we should enter our arguments with a sense of humility. We should understand not only that we can be wrong, but that the way we see the world is likely not the way the world is. The way we see the world is likely, almost inevitably, compromised by how we want to see the world. And when we recognize that, and when we enter arguments knowing this to be so, it's more likely that our argument will be constructive and productive. Humility makes democracy work better. Now, I have to pause here and talk about the elephant in the room. Because in terms of these two categories, telling the truth and humility, there are few people on this planet less equipped to carry it out than the current occupant of the White House, President Donald Trump. Over 8,000 documented false and misleading statements since he took office. 8,000. And even if you think the guy is doing a fantastic job, you have to acknowledge there's not a humble bone in his body. So by my lights, Donald Trump is bad for democracy. And if you're looking for a role model, I would strongly suggest you look elsewhere. And that goes for anyone who spurns the truth and denies the compromised condition of their own perspective. So if that's true, then what should you do? How do you become a better free citizen? Third point, third practice. Join something. Democracy is about people meeting each other face to face and arguing about common problems. And the best way to practice that is in a group. Now, it can be a partisan group, fine, but it doesn't have to be. And really, in the current climate, it's probably better that it isn't. But it can be anything you have an interest in. Improv, ultimate. I just found out recently that Penn State has a beekeepers club. Fine. Anything that brings you together with people who are different from you, who have different perspectives and values, works fine. Your generation is extremely adept at social media. And there is nothing wrong with that, except when it replaces face-to-face interaction. It is easy to hate an avatar. It is easy to be mean and cruel to a nameless, faceless commentator online. But when you meet people face to face, when you get to know them, when you work together with them in pursuit of any common objective, you come to realize that hate is harder. You come to realize that most people, not all people by any means, but most people are just like you. They're flawed human beings who are doing the best they can, and they don't want to hurt anybody. And once we recognize that, our argument gets better. Democracy gets better. So that's it. 3 little things. Not going to change the world. They're not going to bring us around a campfire and sing Kumbaya. Again, disagreement is inevitable. But if we become better free citizens, it's more likely that we will fight fair. And in the midst of our fight, we will come to feel a sense of common purpose and mutual respect. And it's in those conditions that democracy thrives. So if you want democracy to work better, go make it better. Become a better free citizen. And in this time between elections, do what you can to improve what is ultimately the least worst game in town. So don't be intimidated. Go up there. Stand in the box. Dig in your back foot and take your swings. Thank you.